Hi, here we are again. We're three old guys, three old friends, excuse me, three old guys uh, talking about music. Yeah, so this time around, this is our 12th playlist. I'm here usually we're on three different screens. I'm here visiting Jose in San Antonio. Dave's in Colorado, as he is. Yeah, this time this is my choice, and so um, thought we should focus on live music. And so all the songs on this playlist are live performances, and unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that we might listen to live isn't on Apple Music, but we found some good ones. So with that, I'll start off by saying my I used to work with a guy who had put no value into live recordings. And he was like, it's either exactly like the performance. I mean the record, the original. So why pay for it twice? Or it's just bad and you can't see the visual and stuff. I completely disagree. There's so much value to yeah, seeing a concert is great, and we three have seen many, and we'll probably talk about those. But um, the so many things can come up from in live performances, even somebody making a mistake, then they talk about it in the show. It's something you're not going to get anywhere else. um, a lot of we've seen a lot of shows, like I said, and so sometimes those recordings are out there, and there's so many opportunities for spontaneity, going off into jams and things like that. So we'll talk more about our favorites of those kinds. But speaking of favorites, I thought I might kick things off by asking you guys, what on this playlist, what was your favorite? Either your favorite of all the songs out there, or your personal the favorite of the one you put. I guess you could do both if you want. We could just kind of discuss those songs as we go. So
Go ahead,
Well,
Dave.
I'll say, we all have our own um, favorites and things we do. That's why we put the songs we want on the playlist on. So, I would automatically go, well, the songs I put on were my favorites because I love them so much. They're really good. But really trying to look at what surprised me or what caught my attention from what you two put on is probably what I would focus on. And there's a couple of them that I think jump out at me. Um, I would kind of think that I liked the Grateful. I never heard the Grateful Dead song, so we'll start with that one, "Standing on the Moon." Um, even though it's so repetitious, it's the same thing. It's over and over and over and over again. But just like Bob Dylan does, just like the Grateful Dead does, that's one I think that I had never heard, and I kind of listened to it a couple of times this last week and really liked it. I liked the lyrics of it. I liked the pace of it. I just liked it all the way around. I liked the message, and so I would probably say that's the one that I keep going back to and wanting to listen to more often. Um, but again, I thought the whole set list that we put together was pretty good. The way it just flowed through, and we all have our own things that we like to do, but it seemed to mesh together really well from one song to the next. So um, yeah, I think that's the one that's again surprised me the most. The other one was probably the last one. Was just the Muffin Man Zappa, and we'll get more into
yeah.
to talking about that one because I don't know Zappa and I've never listened to a lot of Zappa, and so that's the other one that I think I keep coming back to.
Well, Jose, the first one was yours, so why don't you
Right.
talk about that?
Yeah, and talking in general, first of all, of the whole set list, I think this has all the live things that we like in a concert. We have the monumental. I put the night thing. That's a monumental concert. The Last Waltz. We have some of those with your Janis Joplin. Ball and Chain. So you have that on this list. Then you have the essential sing along. With the Fogelberg, and what a great song that is, uplifting. I always enjoy it. I love listening to that, especially in the morning. And we've all been to a concert where we all sing along.
Mm.
It sounds kind of hokey sometimes. It feels, but you do. and you're part of that energy, which of course leads, of course, to live concerts being so fun for me, and I'm sure for y'all, is the energy that you get as and also give, not to get overly hippie deep, but from the band to the things that when it's a good show, and when the musicians, because we've been to so many, are having a good time or they're just doing the routine as opposed to that. So, and I think this whole tape has a lot of them. I'll say I enjoyed the Bob Geldof. Probably every time it comes on, you're like, man, that has all the elements. He's having fun. He has kind of a little message there. He's telling you a story. The melody's good, and just overall live fun. And that's why we go to concerts, to have fun and listen to the music. Music's always the priority, but having fun as well is part of that. And that Geldof song really, and the Warren Zevon,
We'll
poor,
talk about
just in the middle of
Some
a
things
show, come
came up
on
with
out. I'll have
Warren
you
Zevon.
kill, just having fun. And I
Yeah.
think that's what we like about live music.
I like that part of the Warren Zevon song, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. Yeah, I like that one
Yeah,
too.
I have to agree with Jose. I think my my favorite, that wasn't one of my choices. But I think my favorite on the album, which is one that I hadn't heard before, was the Bob Geldof. It's what is it? The Great Song of Indifference, which he described as an old Scottish song, something like that. It was from Live 8, which the only thing I ever saw from that concert was Pink Floyd, the last full group performance together. Yeah, it's so funny because the contrast between kind of the really heavy message of the indifference of people to all the crazy stuff going on around the world, and love and everything else. I don't care about this, I don't care about the opposite. It's like, it's a great message, but it's such a fun song. That Celtic thing going, I tried to look it up. I don't know who was backing him up, because I like some Irish bands, the Chieftains and the Dubliners, and the Pogues, and I'm sure there's others. They sounded like kind of more like an Irish band, but I don't know. So, but I haven't found it.
And I put that one on because, like I said, you had been influencing me with the Pogues and with uh, can't think of the guy who passed away.
Shane McGowan.
McGowan. Yeah. So I said, okay, I'm going to put this one on for Mike. I like to do the little jig thing too every now and then, and do that Irish thing, and so yeah, it was way cool. I think you hit on some elements too of just what makes a good live song. Sometimes it's audience participation. Sometimes it's changing it up and doing something a little bit different than the original recording was. Yeah, so I think our playlist had a lot of elements of all of that, which I think was good. And then, but yet we stayed kind of in the things that are our wheelhouse, or our favorites, or our things that we do. Jose still was able to slip the Fish in, the Mo in, the Grateful Dead in, all three of those. But yet wherever they were in, it just flowed with the playlist. So I thought that was way cool.
You talk about mixing it up, and I think another essential of live shows is the mix up. And I'll go on my little spiel here, and it coincides with Mike putting on Brain Damage, by Austin Lounge Lizards, right? That I've heard different bluegrass people do that as well, but it's always good. It's always interesting when you go to see some of your bands and they do a cover of something, you know. So that leads me a little to, of course, I did put all my jam. I put my gumbo, which is a shorter version. Believe me, Fish people know 4 or 5 minutes is nothing for a gumbo. And of course, my Grateful Dead is Standing on the long song. And I can always talk about why I put that on there. And, and then the Mo, because they're just having fun. And the Fish and the Mo ones are more about fun. The lyrics are silly. I've always been kind of accused of that a little early on, that their lyrics are silly. They don't really make sense, but the music's great. You're just like that, and then of course on the Fish one, it's with the giant country horns. So that's an added element that they toured with them early, but it's not often. And of course the Mo's just having some fun with a crazy little song like that. So, and I'll just get to the Grateful Dead. And reason I picked that is of course, it came later on in the dark, so it was one of the later songs. You didn't get to hear it as much, and it, you know, in every Grateful Dead show, you have the Jerry Slow song, Stella Blue, China Doll, Black Peter, or Standing on the Moon, and later. And then you were always hoping, I hope he plays Standing on the Moon, because they just didn't do it all that often. So
I can't remember. I only saw the Dead once. It was in '88. And this recording you had was from '90, I believe.
91.
And or 91. And so I don't remember. I have an actual bootleg of that show I went to. So they played 2 nights in Dallas. And I don't remember if that was one of the songs. I do remember that song. We may have done it on not the live version, but we may have had it on a playlist. But I had that record. And honestly, at the time, there were other songs from that record that stuck out more to me. And so, I didn't, but now that I've listened to it in this recording, it's really interesting. It's hopefully I get this right. It's somebody basically on the moon watching the earth just basically falling apart, all the people fighting. And I thought that was very interesting. I liked it. The Mo and Fish songs, both of them, I was going to ask you, what are they about? The Mo song sounds like it's about, and the Mo song is, what is it?
Threw It All Away.
Threw It All Away. Which when I heard that title, I initially thought it was a Bob Dylan and Johnny Cash song. But it's first it sounds like maybe it's about a guy who's just basically wasted his life. But then you kind of hear it almost sounds like a bigger view of like our society and the crazy stuff that goes on. And then the Gumbo Fish.
That's just how
I don't know what to make of that.
I think I put it on. First, they're having fun, and the song before it, "Cry Me a River" by Joe Cocker, kind of has the same feel. Has the piano version, or in this case, Gumbo the synthesizer, has the horns going, has those kind of that New Orleans type feeling in it. And that's kind of why I put it together. Again, Gumbo isn't one of my favorite Fish songs. It's not one of my worst. It's there. It's always fun to hear. But if I had my choice of picking a Fish song, I'd probably put a 12-minute version of something or 13-minute version of something. But I was within the boundaries, and again, it flowed with the Cry Me a River, no pun intended, and it's just a fun song to listen to.
And that raises talking about song length raises a good point, that we were concerned about how long this playlist would be, and it did go long considerably. We usually try to keep it to an hour, and it was almost an hour and a half. But even with that, I was surprised how many shorter songs we found. And you mentioned "Cry Me a River." That was my first song, and it was Joe Cocker, and I think the record's Mad Dogs and Englishmen. And I couldn't tell you everybody in the band, but he was surrounded himself with some really good players. And the piano and the part where guy goes 1, 2, 3, 4 near the very end of the song, those are both Leon Russell. I've seen a video of that. It's great. Leon, I love Leon Russell, and Joe Cocker for me was an acquired taste, but I love this song. That record has, I think, a little help from my friends on it, which is pretty well known, but this is probably my favorite. So
I like the Joe Cocker too. Hey, you said something a minute ago that I wanted to talk about, because I didn't really get into it, but I know that you two did. You talked about all the bootlegs, and I started thinking back, like, okay, well, why didn't I have a bunch of these bootlegs? And so, I mean, just the phrase of that, it wasn't like, I mean, sometimes they would get them and then they would record them and then they'd be on a vinyl or something like that, and you'd have that you could see, oh, this was live at the Fillmore, this was whatever, and there was some, but most of the time it was just people recording these things and then made tapes of them and passed them around. Or how did you end up with this plethora of these cassette tapes that were bootlegs? Because I'll just tell you, back in the day, it's not like I had a stash of all these bootleg tapes. I know you all did, so maybe expound about that a little bit.
Talk about this.
Well, how about do you want me since you were more of a collector than I was.
Well, let me give a little history of
All right,
bootlegs
all right.
in general, and then I'll let Mike
Yeah.
talk.
Oh, sure.
Bootlegs in general, of course, bootlegs were actually it was a tradition that people did. They actually sold them at the record stores, so it's always been a part. It wasn't until, of course, the artists started cracking down at kind of the mid '70s, because there were a lot of live stuff that people naturally accepted and were made out in the open. And then, like you said, then it went underground, and then it became tapes, and then it became records and tapes, and then all of a sudden CDs, and then it became really accessible once the internet hit. So that's how I got through it. But Mike, you
Yeah, I agree. It's like it's the passing around thing of the tapes was I guess pretty common. I only have one bootleg tape, and that was the first Neil Young show I saw, which was all acoustic, just him on stage, and a buddy that I was there with, a couple other people. He met this guy later who was at that show and recorded it. Um, and so the guy gave him a tape. People trade tapes, you have something good that somebody else wants and whatever. There's not a lot of money spent on that. But so then he made a copy for me. Everything else, and Jose got a little, it's like with him, everything else is on CD. Well, not, like with him, it's like I have a ton of those CDs and I got them all from online. There's different, I don't know if the same resources are out there anymore because I don't think I have a CD burner anymore. But there were tons of different places you could get. Like there's a whole group that's focused on Frank Zappa bootlegs, and there's thousands of them. And I have one of those the folders that you fit 4 on a page. I have one of those full and still some extra. And then the other thing about bootlegs, usually the quality's pretty bad. If you're lucky, you can get, maybe some bands like the Grateful Dead and where they kind of allowed that stuff more, the quality's better. But some shows, I'm pretty sure Zappa didn't want people, he wanted his own version. He wanted other things out there. So,
well, I'm not gonna beat the horse, but I'll let me explain about the boots or how I got tapes because I was in my speech writing class and I did a story my speech on the Grateful Dead. There was the guy sitting there, it's like, hey, you want tapes of the Grateful Dead? Give me 10 blanks and I'll give you 10 tapes. That was the evolution of mine. And then he says, here's a list of 150 people and they all trade tapes. If you have something that's not different, you find them, you look at their list, you all compare lists. And so I would literally go buy 8 tapes, send them off. He would send me his 8 tapes. That's my group has grown to over 500 something tapes. Then you found out other groups that also obviously had bootlegs. So then the CD became. I used to go to a record store, a record show. There was a guy in the back. There was always the guy in the back, and he had nothing but boots. But they were expensive, $20 a pop usually. So if you bought a 3 CD, it was like $60. But of course, no one else had them, and this guy was making money hand over fist because there was just so many shows that you wanted that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy has it. Then of course the internet hit and Napster and everything else. But there's a little history.
You mentioned Frank Zappa, and again, I told you I haven't really gotten into his music over the years. So I did a little research. Went to the computer, and man, he made like over 60 albums in his time and in his short time before he passed away. But one of the things I read when I was reading through it, it said was like in the early 70s, and he was having a dispute with the record company, which isn't unusual in those days. And at some point, I don't remember what radio station it was, but he went to a radio station, jumped on, and started playing the whole album from start to finish on the thing. And in between was saying, hey, everybody, get your cassettes out, start recording this, and essentially bucking against the system and saying, all right, I'm going to go to a radio station and put this out for nothing, anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting.
My Jose's seen the documentary about him. I've seen read related things, but he had this thing in his home called the Utility Muffin Research Kitchen, which will relate to the song I'm about to talk about that I put on. But it was his like in-home studio, but then like down in the basement was just stacks and stacks. He recorded everything. And I think like a lot of these shows he did that there are bootlegs. He like had his own like mobile recording thing go along, and there's probably great versions. But this group, his children, the Zappa Family Trust, they're smart and they're releasing them bit by bit, not for free. And the other thing about him, he did this thing. He got really mad about bootlegs and tried to make some money off of it. He put out these. Basically, he transferred them to CD and put out 4 or 5 of the most well-known bootlegs and charged for them. And it was called Beat the Boots. And I never bought one of those, but I always thought that it was like he put out a clean version. Now, my understanding is they were as crappy as some other bootlegs you get, which is a good segue into the Zappa song, which is my song and the last one. Okay, if I go ahead and start talking about that?
Well, of course.
Yeah, I got a couple things to say about it. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, yeah, so I had usually the person who does the playlist goes first and then the other two, whatever order. But I requested that I go last because I wanted to end with this song. And the reason for that is at the very end of the song, well, I'll give you some background. Oh, yeah, at the very end of the song, he says, "Good night, Austin, Texas, wherever you are," which is a funny statement given what Austin, Texas used to be. It's kind of changed now, but used to be kind of a trippy, wild place. But he played, that show is at the Armadillo. The album's called Bongo Fury. It's a live album of selected parts of a show at the Armadillo World Headquarters. Had a lot of great musicians, but one of them was Captain Beefheart. There's a lot of stuff to say about him. He was just kind of out there. In fact, right before he said, "Good night, Austin, Texas, wherever you are," he introduced the band and said what they played. And when he got to Captain Beefheart, he said like what, piano, saxophone, and madness or something like that. And you can hear him at the end of the song singing like along with the chorus. But like this Zappa song is like, it's kind of funny because it's both elements of kind of the stuff he did. There's a comedy at the first, this weird story about a guy baking muffins and whatever. And then the last is just this extended jam, which is still one of my favorite Zappa things. He just goes for like 3 or 4 minutes. So I had to end with that. And the only other thing I'd add, I learned this recently. The cover of that record shows him and Captain Beefheart sitting. He's got, I think Frank has an ice cream cone in his hand, and Beefheart has like a soda or something. He's looking down. He's not looking at the camera. Zappa looks pissed, whatever. Maybe there's a normal expression. But that photo was taken just down the street from the Armadillo World Headquarters, which is no longer there. This place that's still there called Sandy's. It's like if you've ever gone down to Barton Springs or whatever, it's a little small place. They sell ice cream and chili dogs. And we always take our kids down there. And I never knew this whole time they took this picture inside of Sandy's. So I pretty much now exhausted my commentary on Frank Zappa. So you say you had something to say, Dave?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that again. I don't know a lot about Zappa and his music, but I really digged the style, the comedy, the stuff at the beginning and the jam as well. And I know that's why you put it on at the end to say, "So long, Austin," whatever. So I didn't realize this, but I guess so. He died way young, right? Prostate cancer at age 52. Again, I'm thinking it was back in 93 or something, and I'm like, well, I would have been clueless as to that he even died or that he passed away, because again, I wasn't really into or listening to his music or whatever. But then as I started listening to this stuff, I'm going, and he put out so much material in such a short time. We said this before in our podcast. Gosh, what would he be doing the last 30 years, right? He would have just been producing and doing other things and using his creative genius to do that. He is unlike probably any other artist. I mean, it's hard to put him in a box. He's all over the place in the things that he does. One of the stories I saw, though, as I was researching it, though, had to do with something in like 1971 where he was at a show and all of his equipment caught on fire and they lost everything. And so they had to basically rent some equipment to go play the next gig. And then he was at the place called the Rainbow Theater, I guess. And then during that time, he ended up falling off stage, and they thought he had died or something. And he was pretty beaten up, and it took him a year and a half to recover from it. And then even after that, his vocals had changed. He couldn't sing as high as he used to. He had problems with his larynx and that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, wow, what an amazing story. And they said, and I didn't know this either. We talked about Deep Purple a couple of times. We had them on one of our iconic classic playlists, and it said that the song "Smoke on the Water" was an homage, or it came from that incident that occurred. I didn't know that. Did you all know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. He mentioned in there.
You
something
never
about
told
Spring
me. You
Death
guys are
Mountain.
supposed to share this with me,
How
so I
did
don't
you
get
not
all my
know that?
information from Wikipedia. I mean,
I thought this was common rock knowledge.
I didn't know that. No, but now I'm
They used
connecting all the
name
dots.
in the song. Frank Zappa and the Mothers had the best place in town. But
There
some
you go.
stupid with the flare gun shot it. They
Burn
burned
the
their
place.
equipment. Dang, 2 + 2. Just kidding. Now the documentary does extensively go into when he fell off the stage, that how that really set him back for a while and really in a state of depression. But watch the documentary. He does talk extensively about that injury and what happened to him and how he changed. So not that he changed.
And his first album was a double album, and it was only the second double album, right after Blonde on Blonde, Dylan's album. It was actually only the second time somebody said, I'm producing a double album. Interesting.
And speaking of live, I don't think any one of us have seen him. That's one of those things that you wish you would have seen, and kind of going back to the list, like Supertramp. Did you see? We never saw Supertramp, right, Dave? You put that song
I
on.
never did.
I remember wanting to see Zappa when I was in college at Austin, and he was just so late. He never came through the Austin area again, and so I never got a chance. I'm looking at the list. I don't think I saw any of these bands live that I put on.
Late 80s. Late 80s is when he came down with his cancer. So if you didn't see him by then that last 3 or 4 years, he probably wasn't touring all that much.
Right. My favorite thing is always there's what's the movie anyway, Adventureland, where the guy props himself up like he's the boyfriend. He says he played with Zappa, and it turns out to be a lie. Like, oh, I once jammed with Zappa. I met a person once at a record shop and kind of told me the same story. And I'm thinking, is he telling me a lie that he got to jam with Zappa? So
I think it was pretty particular who he jammed with.
Right.
So I don't know.
Right.
He was very much a perfectionist. I saw a video of him. It's just a little bit of it, but playing with Pink Floyd, like at some live show.
And Hendrix, he's playing.
Oh, I didn't see that.
That's out there somewhere. There's a recording of that.
Did his kids carry on playing? I know he had a couple of kids.
Oh yeah, Dweezil is making a living off that. Zappa plays Zappa. He's been doing it for the last 20 years. Yeah, he just does his dad's music basically, which isn't bad.
I don't want to keep. We're spending a lot of time on Zappa. I don't want to. There's more stories, but the documentaries, what I've seen is really good. Jose said it's good, so I need to finish it.
But yeah, going back, Supertramp, we never saw them. Who else is on here that obviously there's people who
never saw Dan Fogelberg. Yeah,
never saw him, right?
Warren Zevon.
See, I think only the ones that I put on I've seen.
The bands.
I
take that back. I did see Cry Me a River.
Joe Cocker.
Joe Cocker, thank you. He was part of this concert. It was called the British Invasion. It was a benefit. And I maybe have mentioned this in a previous one of these, but it was a benefit for Ronnie Lane from the Faces, who had MS, and it was everybody: Joe Cocker, Jeff Beck, like almost practically the whole all the guitarists from Yardbirds, Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, and many others. But Joe Cocker was there.
So as I said, the Warren Zevon one, so he actually wrote that song, right? I mean, I knew it from Linda Ronstadt, but when I researched and looked at that, now that's his song. I mean, that's the one he wrote. But I was going to ask you about it because there were some lyrics in there that were kind of off. When he starts singing, there's like the second or third verse. He gets like two lines into it, and then he says, "Well, there's my best friend George" or something, right?
Yeah,
And
he,
but,
he,
but when you look at the lyrics on Apple Music, it says, "I'm not going to sing those lyrics, those dirty lyrics," or something like that. I'm like,
yeah, this is a great
talking
example of going off script. And Warren Zevon is interesting because he was a prodigy. He used to study with, I think, Shostakovich, Stravinsky. One of the, he'd go like over to his house. This guy, he lived in the same part of California where he did, I think, and study with them. But he wrote, yeah, he wrote "Poor, Poor, Pitiful Me" and Linda Ronstadt did it, but he had recorded earlier. This show, I don't know. He had 2 live albums. He did a lot of acoustic stuff. This one's all electric, I believe. And he, so I will quote, he goes off script. He's about halfway through a verse. If you're not familiar with the song, it's about, from his perspective, a guy and the many troubled relationships he's had with people. He's getting in this one, she's like an S&M person, and she beats him up really bad. He's halfway through that verse when he goes, "Yeah, here's my road manager, my best friend." And then he yells at the audience, "Get up and dance. Get up and dance or I'll kill you. And you know I have the means." I put that whole song on just for that. Because it's like, so I think it was during his heavy drug phase, so that maybe contributed.
No, I think I looked up the original lyrics, said something like it was like, domestic violence. So it said, "She asked me if I beat her. She took me up to her hotel room and wrecked my Mojo heater." Whatever
Good
that
one.
means.
Uh,
But that's
Oh,
that's the original lyric. That's the lyric that was missing.
oh, okay. There's another verse. I think I was confusing. Where there's another one where he's like, "I met this girl in Yokohama. She really beat me up good. I said, 'Please don't hurt me, mama,' or something." Yeah.
Right.
I don't know how. I don't know. I don't recall what Linda Ronstadt did with that. How she changed it.
I'll have to listen to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well,
So
Speaking
we were
of,
talking about concerts, and the only one on this whole list that I had even been to was Jethro Tull. That was the only one of
Never
the
saw it.
list.
let's talk about that concert, Dave. What were your recollections? You remember the concert was good because obviously it was great, and it's one of my top 5 concerts because it was just so spontaneous and all the things that he did. But of course, what was the most interesting part of that concert?
The crowd and around us was pretty
Him
animated.
telling
Hey,
that
for me, I was
him
just gonna
telling
say,
that
for
dude
me,
to shut up.
belt up, mate,
Up. Just belt up, mate, in the middle of the
belt
concert.
up, mate. That's right, in the middle of the show. We were on that. That was to date. To that point, that was the best tickets I had ever had. It was 8th row or 9th row, 10th row, something like that. 10th row, center stage, so it was right in the middle. We didn't get to sit down at all. We were standing pretty much the whole time, if I remember. But that was probably the best, closest I'd ever been, right, in a show to see him. So you could see facial expressions and everything else that Ian Anderson was doing. So yeah,
Right, when
Who's that?
he had first they came out and the guy sits on a park bench, he's dressed as a bum, and then he pretends to throw up in a trash can, he pulls out a mandolin, and then the other bum comes over and he pulls out a guitar, and then they play for like 7 to 10 minutes. You're like, oh my god, what's going on here? Then he's doing the broadsword thing, so he brings out that 20-foot broadsword he has, and then the coolest effect was he did the song about the doctor, and he would walk across stage and he'd go next to an amplifier, and then we'd come around and the strobe lights are going, some other doctor would follow him till he had about 4 doctors following him, and at the very end he had some strange creature looking big birdish thing come out as the 5th person and walk across the stage. See, it was just a mishmash of just craziness on
I
that.
don't remember that last part at
Yeah, I
all.
did. I
Are
remember
you
all
sure
that.
that actually happened, or?
I'm not going to talk about. I'm not going to indict anyone on this and who did what did who. But let's just say I was probably the only sober one there. So, having said that, it made an impact on what I was saying and like, oh my god, this is the best concert I've ever been to. And up to that point, it really had because, like you said, the closest we've been to that. The music, he did play songs. He played a bunch of the songs that we love, and it just theatrics of it all was just like. And then of course him telling someone to shut up in the middle of things, trying to give this heartfelt, speech. It's just like belt up, mate, just belt up, just shut up,
And that was at the old Hemisphere Arena, right? I mean,
right?
before they did that, and yeah, and that was
Best
one of my
concert. Yeah.
songs from the Wood. That album was probably my favorite Jethro Tull album. Even though I liked the greatest hits and a lot of the other stuff, I didn't have. You had a lot of the other older Jethro Tull albums and turned me on to a lot of the other B cuts and deep tracks and stuff like that I didn't know about. But yeah, so that was a great one for me. I wish there's others I wish I would have been able to go to, but never got the opportunity to go to. Dan Fogelberg, lived in Colorado, and I guess he died fairly early too. He was in his mid to late 50s when he passed away. Could just imagine what he would be doing. But let me talk about that song for a second. There's a place in the world for a gambler. Love that song, but I didn't hear this live version of the song until about like a year and a half ago, something like that. It was just going through Apple Music or other playlists kind of stuff, and I stumbled across it. And I have to tell you, I like the song so much already that I'd never heard the live version of this. And I think I actually did see this concert on on Access or some show as well. But when it gets to the point where the audience sings, if you're in your car or you're listening to this, it's pretty good because they do sing loud. They do kind of raise it up so you can hear it. But if you crank it up a little bit louder so that you can really hear the audience, man, it feels like I'm there. And then I start singing it, as well. And it just makes me feel good. I feel so good when I sing it. And it has such a great lyrics, great message to it. So I had to put that song on for sure.
Yeah, that audience participation is one of those things about concerts that's, makes them great. This one, I like this song. I think I go off on this too much, but we often put on some songs with dark themes or maybe about something kind of bad happening, because it's what interests us, and but this and the Songs in the Wood, is that what it is? No,
Songs from the Wood.
Songs from the Wood. I'm thinking of a whole different thing there. They both have, the Fogelberg is like, it's about hope, and the Jethro Tull similarly, I think that's really good to have in there. And I'm not dissing any of our songs because, The Night That Drove Old Dixie Down, just from the title, it's trouble. But yeah, those were nice additions.
Well, I think a good addition was that Fall of the Peacemaker, which we haven't really talked about, Molly Hatchet. And that's a different live experience where the band seems to like, we're going to give it our all here. It sounds like it's the last song of the thing. We're going to give it our all. And then kicks in that guitar jam at the end. And man, you could feel the energy coming off that. Like, man, they're giving a good performance here. Plus, the song's great. And to sing those lyrics and then kick it in with that guitar jam, at a show, you're enjoying every moment of that.
Well, I don't know that Molly Hatchet got the recognition necessarily that they deserve. When you listen to a song like this, the first thing I start thinking of is like, man, this sounds kind of like Lynyrd Skynyrd. And then you start listening to it, and no disrespect to Lynyrd Skynyrd, I love Lynyrd Skynyrd as well. But then I'm like going, no, Lynyrd who? This is better than Lynyrd Skynyrd at times. I mean, it's that good. When you get that Southern rock genre that you have there. But this song epitomizes that. I mean, it's got the slow, it's got the piano part like you would have like in Freebird or something like that, but it's got a great melody to it, you know. Um, and then you get into the long jam with it as well. I think it's a kind of a classic kind of thing. I've liked this song for years and was always looking for an opportunity to put it on a playlist. So when we talked live, they had Molly Hatchet live, Double Trouble. I said, yeah, this is one that could. And again, bucket list. I think I've seen a lot of bands like Molly Hatchet opening up for other bands, but I never saw Molly Hatchet, and I probably had the opportunity to as well. Where for 10, 12 bucks, right? Back in the day, it was probably one where we just went, oh, I don't know. I'm already going to, how many are we going to? We're going to 3 this month and 2 next month. And then 2 after that. We'll skip the Molly Hatchet one, or we'll skip the Lover Boy one this time.
We skipped that one.
You
No, I think they just
want
got
to tell that
overshadowed.
story?
What? The
Want to tell that story of waiting in line all
yeah,
night?
that's a long one. We'll talk about it when we talk just about going to concerts and how you got tickets. But Molly Hatchet, I think, got overshadowed by Allman Brothers and Leonard Skinner, and just didn't have the same force as those for some whatever reason. But when you listen to Follow Peacemaker, almost sounds like the intro to Simple Man by Leonard Skinner. That has that same kind of feel. So yeah, no, I should be listening to more Leonard Skinner than what I should have been doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have to plead guilty that I was biased against Molly Hatchet for no good reason. I just didn't get it. The only song I think I knew was it. Did they do "Flirting with Disaster"?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess. But that's just my taste. This one I know I've heard before. I cannot tell you where. I don't know that it got much airplay, and most of their stuff I heard was back on, back in the album rock radio days. When I lived in Dallas, there were a couple stations that played a lot of that. And so maybe that's where I heard it. But it's about, the Peacemakers. John Lennon, getting killed, probably did that song pretty not too long after that. And yeah, I should give him another chance. I feel like I say that way too much about bands on these things, but yeah, so got to be open-minded. So one thing I like to do that I don't do that often, I've noticed that I tend to put on all male singers or bands, and I think maybe overall we kind of tend to do that because that's what we mainly listen to. But it's not exclusively true. I remember a Janis Joplin song back on actually an old tape that I recently found that we did. But I had to put on one by her. This is my long song, and it's "Ball and Chain" from the Monterey Pop concert, and which had some amazing performances by other people. But this is like, I think if you hear any one recording of hers to really get the sense of like the soul and passion and pain that she would put into her performance and singing and just, I mean, she screams in the song at points. And so I really had to, I wanted to put a female performer on there. And it's like, when I thought of that, it's like, it's got to be this one. Cause it's just gut wrenching listening to, and good, but this is somebody seriously suffering in this song. So that was my contribution. So.
No, I think we talked about Mike and I talked about how they had to make her play or do it twice. She's the only one who played twice at Monterey because Albert Grossman, her manager, didn't want them to record this, record them singing or filming him, and then realize how great she was, and everyone was blown away. Then all of a sudden, now she's back on stage again. And that's why we got this fantastic, version. And thank God, imagine not getting a chance to hear this would have been, so bad. And it really what launched her career.
Right. And there's not that many recordings. I mean, how many albums, how many years did she actually have to put out music? What year did she commit suicide? Did she die?
No, well, maybe, I don't know if it's suicide or a drug
Yeah.
overdose, but it's 71. It
71.
was like the same year, I think. Her,
That's
I may be wrong, within short time of each other. Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, and her all died. They may not have been the same year, but it was all around shortly one after the other. Were they all 23? Was that the
27.
27, the 27 club? Is that the, yeah. There's so many people that we like, and on this thing where people they died so young.
Oh, but yeah, and
And
that's
she was from Texas, right? Wasn't she from
Port Arthur.
Port Arthur, Texas? And yeah, but no, I've always liked it. Just there's not enough of her music, right? And so you have a few of these recordings that are iconic, and I'd heard this before years ago, so it brought back a lot of memories again. When I heard it, I thought, oh yeah, she's the queen of that. She's amazing. Yeah, you feel the emotion when she sings.
Right. One more reason to champion live shows, right? Can you imagine? Oh, I'm not going to go see Janis Joplin. Wait, what? Why wouldn't you see someone like that play like that? Oh, I'll just listen to the record. Now, and we all know because we've all been to so many shows that going to a lot, you can put, and this is another thing. All these songs we can play, but it never really captures that moment when you're there live. I'll set an example. When you go to a show, like if I go to a Fish show, I'm like, oh, they did this outrageous thing. Well, they do it quite a bit, but where the drummer plays a vacuum cleaner, and you just think it's the greatest thing in the world. Or when Grateful Dead do drums in space, but when you try to play that back to somebody on a tape, it doesn't translate because you weren't there. So you're hearing these weird sounds coming out of a vacuum cleaner. You're like, Jose's lost his mind. Why does he think this is the greatest thing in the world? Or with drums in space where it's just going on, and then all of a sudden it starts to get really, at a show sometimes you get lost in that if you like Dead shows and you like that portion. A lot of people just go to the bathroom, but I always like that because it was kind of a journey. But when you play that back for someone live, very few times can you capture that memory, and there are some songs on here which really do that. Like I said, the Fogelberg definitely does that. I mean, but could never capture that real live feeling of like being there. We've all had our favorite single. I used to go to Dead shows and that Not Fade Away when they play that, and you have 25,000 people chanting that and screaming that. Man, you get caught up in the moment. But do you have any favorite shows that?
So I was gonna say, Mike, tell me about the Austin Lounge Lizards, because again, I hadn't heard that group, or I actually I actually liked the version of the Pink Floyd Brain Damage. I like when people do stuff like that. You know, yeah, I sometimes catch myself doing stuff like that where if I'm in my car or I'm doing whatever, and I'll take a song like that, maybe not turn it into a bluegrass, kind of thing, but I'll just sing the lyrics and sing it faster and just do it just because it's in my head, same kind of thing. And so I thought that was kind of brilliant how they did that. The harmonies were great, everything was good. But what's the story behind the Lounge Lizards?
Well, the first thing I can tell you is I never saw them. I don't even know if they're still together, but they were like, the music was, I think their peak was in the early 90s, late 80s. And they did a lot of kind of offbeat, kind of, it's folksy bluegrass. And this Brain Damage is bluegrass. And they really, I mean, they have chops, they really do a good job at it. It's just such a kind of contrast there, that compared to what the Pink Floyd song is. Completely different tone to it. I used to hear this song on the radio, and so when I was thinking about doing a live one, this is the one that first came to mind. It's like, I've got to share this with these guys. It's a short song, and I think I'm getting a reputation for putting the novelty songs on these playlists. The only other song by them I could tell you right now is one called Pflugerville, which is the town I live in, which is not often sung about in music. It's spelled PFLU, blah, blah, blah. But it's the PF that, gets everybody's attention. Driving down 35, you'll see the sign before you head into Austin. And sometime I may have to put that song on if it's even available on Apple Music. But yeah, they're kind of a comedy bluegrass band. This show was at the Waterloo Ice House, which to the best of my knowledge is a burger restaurant. I don't even know if it's still around. They must have had an outdoor area where they played it. Sound quality is good, but I'm trying to picture where they would have put the band. It must have been a very intimate show. So.
Like I said, I've been to at least 20 of these bluegrass shows, and they're always translating. There's a whole genre of it. Like there's a whole group dedicated to doing nothing but Led Zeppelin songs. And then Yonder Mountain String Band, they would do like a beautiful version of Dear Prudence by the Beatles. And they did cover songs as well. So you can kind of get used to that. And then one of the best ones was, and it's funny how they equate so well, is a bluegrass band called the Moles. Now everyone used to thought it was Fish, but it was the Moles, and they did Gin and Juice by Snoop Dogg. And it is amazing how it translates from bluegrass to rap, and how it's almost like they could have gone either way. So if you ever want to listen to something different, I might have to put it on one day on the thing. But it is a well done version of that, and that's always part of those things. And hey, doing something different, and it's entertaining. Like seeing Yonder Mountain sing Dear Prudence, man, you like it.
I think the only song we haven't touched on now is
King
Midas in Reverse from Four-Way Street. So, you want to talk about that?
Well, what it was, it wasn't on Four-Way Street when we were growing up. It was part of when they re-released the CD. They added about 5 or 6 songs on the acoustic side. And so when I got that the first time, I was like, hey, what's this? There's extra songs here that we never got to listen to. So I thought I'd throw that out there only because it's kind of a tribute to one of my favorite live albums of all time. I think it's one of the best. I mean, people may disagree with that, but Private Stills National always, and then you got the acoustic side and then the electric side. But that was one of those songs I don't think was initially part of the original Four-Way Street, like Laughing, I don't think by Neil Young was part of the original one. So there were some songs that they added. So that's why I kind of put it on there.
Well, I thought about putting something on from that album. I liked it a lot too. What I liked about the album, the songs and everything were good, but I like the talking and the banter that they had a lot of times at the beginning of the songs or at the end of the songs, like David Crosby and Graham Nash kind of going back and forth about stuff, and they're laughing and they're just going, well, I didn't know you were going to start that way, or I didn't know you would, and yeah, and he said like kind of precarious without a net we're playing, and he just, they're just talking back and forth before they get ready to start singing. And I always thought that was way cool for an album, but especially with the live stuff going on. And so I didn't remember that so this was an add-on to that original album. That's probably why I thought, sounds new and fresh. I didn't recognize it. Or I said to myself, man, I must have just passed through that song every time, or just skipped over it, or didn't listen to that part of it or whatever. So that's good to know, because for a little while there I thought I was losing some brain cells. I'm like, man, I don't remember that song on that album. So thanks for that clarification.
One thing I've been thinking about, I wish I could remember which song it is, but one of these songs, there's an example of something that always struck me strange about the way they divide up songs, put the divide between when one live song ends and the other one begins. And a lot of time they will have all the audience stuff and banter from one song up till right before the divide, and then the divide starts at the beginning of the next song. So I guess you don't, but what happens a lot of times is they introduce somebody or something that's on the next song that has nothing to do with the song that they just played. And then one of these songs that does that, I don't know if it's Rita Coolidge or somebody introduces somebody like that, and it goes into a different band. I wish I could remember off the top of my head which song. I don't know if it was the band, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, the
But-
last waltz you're talking about?
Yeah, maybe
Oh,
it was
yeah.
that where they mentioned like the next performer, and then all of a sudden
Oh, okay.
it's Dan Fogelberg or something. I don't know. If you listen to our playlist, you will find it on there somewhere. But that's
Well, we didn't
kind
talk
of
too
covered the
much.
list. The only other thing I mean, you guys can talk. We can talk about whatever you want. I have a whole bunch of songs that we only have 5 apiece, and we had discussed having fewer than 5 because of the length of these songs. But there's a ton that we left off. We had to pick and choose from. I'm just kind of curious what some of your also rans were. A couple, I'll just throw a couple of mine out. One, I was up until I decided to add Janis Joplin. It was going to be Bob Dylan playing with the band as most of them as his backup band in England just after he went electric. And there's a pretty famous video of it, and there's a recording too where they do like a Rolling Stone, and leading into it, the crowd is taunting him because they're so mad he went electric from acoustic. One guy yells Judas, and so he kind of yells back at him, and he turns around to the band and says, "Play it fucking loud," and they go to this angry version of Like a Rolling Stone. So that was one. There were some songs off Waiting for Columbus by Little Feat that I considered putting on, and many, many more. I could spend an hour or more talking about it. But those are my 2 top ones. You guys have any?
I'll go. I'll go.
Yeah,
Go ahead, man.
I had a couple. Well, go ahead. Well, I had a couple. Yeah, that because of length and everything else, it just didn't get to putting on. I wanted to put on a Yes. Your Move, All Good People. I know it's been overplayed. It's a live thing, but I like how in that one he gets to the end and they start doing a little jam, and he introduces the band. Christopher Squire. And Alan White. And I kind of always like that way that they do that. Plus, it's just a good live version of the song. And then I guess the other one that I wish, that I thought about putting on was not to just have Janis Joplin be the only female, but I thought of Carole King and her live recordings with James Taylor. There's a couple of really, really good ones that she does. I think the one that I was going to put on was kind of a medley that she has, Up on the Roof and Will You Still Love Me. It's kind of a collage of those songs. So that was one that I looked at putting on. And then the other one was just a classic rock album, but it was just way too long. And that's Frampton Comes Alive and Do You Feel Like I Do. First time he, puts the vocal thing to the guitar, and does it, that whole thing. I mean, I lost my mind when I first heard that back in the day. So those were some that didn't make the list for me. What about you, Jose?
Yeah, really, my problem was just finding songs that I really wanted to play per se because of the length and stuff, like my fish. But there was some I like Clapton 74, 75 a lot live. For some reason, I like that, even though some people may rail on some of that. David Gilmour live with Richard Wright. I had a couple of those live at Good Dance, which was the last time those 2 guys played together. There's a bunch of beautiful songs on there. Him live at Pompeii, David Gilmour. I just like some of the way he sometimes interprets. Now, I wouldn't probably have played any Pink Floyd, but or High Hopes, even though I probably might have played that. I think they
I
did
had that
on that one. Right. And so there was some, I mean, let's face it, we're probably going to do a live part 2 at some point because there's just so much amazing live music there. And, it's interesting that we grabbed a lot of the elements that we really like about them, but I'm sure that we know there's 100,000 more songs that we love that are live that, we're more than happy to share with each other because, that's what we do.
Mike, did you think about like Johnny Cash, Folsom Prison, or
Yes, as a
REM?
matter of fact, I should have made a list of the ones that were on my list that didn't make it. Yeah, there were 3. Well, there's live at San Quentin and live at Folsom Prison. And I think Folsom is better well known. They even reference it in that biopic with Joaquin Phoenix. But yeah, A Boy Named Sue was
Right.
speaking of novelty songs, that one written by Shel Silverstein, if you're familiar with him. And then he does, yeah, his Ring of Fire from there.
Cocaine
couple-
Blues is a great song
yeah,
on that live
yeah,
album.
yeah. And the
I like the
that's-
I like
he
the
has,
duet with June
what?
Carter. I like the duet Jackson. I like that song.
yeah, and he does one called like 25 Minutes to Go, which is the condemned perspective in the last 25 minutes of his life. And it's funny that you can get a little humor out of that subject, but he manages to do it. And of course, one of the great parts of that is, I mean, these prison things is, every once in a while there's an announcement like prisoner blah blah blah, please go to reception, you have get or the audience. I mean, they're just like when he talks about some suffering criminal or whatever, the audience, the prisoners, the inmates just go nuts. It really, I'm sure, meant a lot, to them. And my hat, if I had a hat on, my hat off to him for that. But yeah, there's others. And yeah, I think there should be a live too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, all the heavy metal I haven't put on there. Come on! Oh my god!
I'll
All
follow
the
it with.
jam bands
I did have a
haven't
Black Sabbath song I wanted to play, but I held off. At some point, we're gonna have to go hardcore, and I don't mean just heavy metal. Maybe the theme will be more, whether it's like the hard punk rock or the Clash and the Sex Pistols, and then the hard. Then Jose and I will be able to have some heavy metal in there too. I mean, maybe we go with that theme once in a while where it's just hardcore stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Sure.
mean, it's just too many good songs that we wouldn't even scratch the surface of. That's why it's always fun. Which will be you next, Dave.
Well, and the one of that I wanted to put on and I didn't, and I wanted to put it on as homage to, and I'll ask this question to you all if you can remember this. So for me, I was going to put on a Triumph song, which was like Blinding Light Show, which is probably one of the most famous ones or something like that, because that was my first concert ever, was Triumph. And so I don't know, do you remember your first concert?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mine was Elvis Presley. Oklahoma City, like a year or 2 years before he died, I think his next to last tour. And went with my mom. And I don't remember much about that show, except that I thought he looked like Evel Knievel with the cape and the bodysuits and all that stuff. He was quite large at that point, not to judge, but he was big. He was heading towards the end. But, I saw Triumph too once.
Well, Ted Nugent.
Thanks
I'm
for
sure you
sharing.
came with
Thank
me,
you.
Dave,
Thank you very
because
much.
We went together, so we went to all the concerts.
That was,
Ted Nugent,
but
right?
you had been to something before that though, right?
No real official concert. I mean, you go to stuff with your parents and stuff like that. But my first official, and I remember it was me and you, and we went mezzanine section 113. So
Wow.
I don't remember.
That's
that.
it was
impressive.
my first concert. So, when it's your first concert, you're just like, oh my God, this is what it's all about. And then, of course, it's Ted Nugent. So you're like, oh,
So,
there's better to be had.
so who was the opening band?
Cool. I'd have to look it up. But man, it was somewhat obscure, right?
Like, was it Mahogany Rush
It could have been. Or Pat Travers.
or Pat Trav, somebody like that? Yeah.
I know we've seen Pat Travers.
I saw Pat Travers.
And we saw
Yeah.
Triumph together.
I think it was Mahogany Rush. I can't tell you who Mahogany Rush is or what they play, but for some reason,
Well, what's his
that-
name? The
Yeah.
guitarist, Frank. Well, now I forget his name, but Frank Mahogany Rush. Yeah.
Bob-
yeah,
Bob-
they're good. But yeah, no, that was my first one. A little ashamed to say that, but because it's Ted. But I enjoyed it immensely. Ted Nugent was an icon back then, and you growing up in the '70s, right? Did you see Triumph at Municipal Auditorium, or did you see him at Hemisphere?
It was at the Hemisphere Arena.
Okay,
I saw him at
Yeah.
Reunion, and I think it was the tour, that Blinding Light Show. What album was that off of? Was that a later album?
The Blinding Light Show was one of the first albums,
Oh.
I think. Then they had the one that had "Lay It on the Line" and "Just a Game." I think that was their second album.
Then I
And
saw
then-
him the
but then
tour
this
after
one-
that.
But the tour after that was like the that's the one the song was probably the third album that had Fight the Good Fight, or no,
Right.
I don't know,
You went to. I remember us going to
Magic Power and Fight the Good Fight and all that kind of stuff.
But that was our. What was our high school song? Right. It was. No. It was. We all thought it was going to be that, but it was like the best years of our lives.
Best
But
years
everyone
of our
thought
life.
it was going to be Fight the Good or something like it from Triumph.
Right.
From Discovery.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember singing it and then singing at that Texas Jam.
Right.
Yep.
My second show was Van Halen.
Was that our Van Halen or?
Yeah. Van Halen was that in would have been 81, right? Or 82.
No, it was 82. I have the ticket stub here somewhere, but that was the time we went to go buy tickets. Remember when we went to cross the Ticketmaster and we had 3 people and you had the number. We were like 7, 8, 9 in line and we went in. We had 30 tickets. We bought 30 and we sold all of them. People are calling you, can I get Van Halen? And then at one point, you talked about 3 shows in a month. We had, I think it was Van Halen, Jethro Tull, and Nazareth. And they were all like, all had tickets in hand. And then REO, that kind of stuff. But yeah, was that Van Halen talking about?
No, we started feeling like the guy from Fast Times at Ridgemont, right?
Right. I thought you had gone to the Foreigner 4 tour. Do you go with Mike McCord?
I don't.
He went to
recall.
that. I thought you had gone to that. And then
No,
Ozzy right before that.
We had our reunion and Chris Wimsat, I saw him there and he's like, yeah, remember we went to that show, and I'm like, I was trying to remember going to a rock show with Chris Wimsat.
Did we go with him? AC?
Yeah.
I know we went with Rick
I don't know
Russell.
which one it was,
but not many people entered our circle. We had it was you,
I know,
me,
that's what,
right, and then it was
he was sure that we were at I think it was the Van Halen concert. He was sure that he was there with us.
and I'm sure he was because everyone in our section was from Roosevelt because we had all 30 of those tickets.
Right.
So it might have been him. I bet he did with probably Glenn Cole or someone like that, and Jimmy White, because Jimmy White, remember, was friends with Tom Topol. So
Right.
more so than we were, so to speak.
Now I can save this because it's a little long, but my best concert story of all time was the I'll just give you the title. One got screwed before, one got screwed during, and one got screwed after.
That
That's
was
the
the
top.
Ari. That was the infamous Ario thing.
That was it was Rush. It was Rush.
No, it was Ario because
Are you sure?
because Robert was with me, and I have. Are you talking
And
about the one where Mike
when
McCord
Tommy-
had to go to the bathroom and was
Yeah, and
crying?
Tommy was embarrassing us because he got stood up and
And so he's dropping acid like it's candy, and he's next to
Yeah.
Robert. Robert's going like, "What is up with this dude?"
Are you
He's
sure
like,
there was
"Every kid's
Ario
pretty
though?
It was Ario.
I thought maybe it was the second time we saw Rush or something,
No,
but
it
maybe
was
it was
Ario.
Ario.
And then you got to the. Did you leave your keys in the car at the
So
end?
so I just kind of spoiled it, but Tommy's date stood him up beforehand, so he spun out of control, and we took him with us, and he was embarrassing everybody because of how he was acting. Mike McCord got his date there. She bolted on him and went down to the floor to be with some other dude, and so he was in the bathroom crying because he was stood up during the show, and I'm consoling him and getting him back to the show. My date, Maria, she was fine. It was great during the show. We had a great time. But when we got back, Mike was so pissed off that Tommy had locked his keys in his car at the park. And so Mike wasn't going to take care of it. And so I was like, oh, this is me. I got to take care of my friend. So I didn't get to take my date home. Not that it would have ended in anything because she was way out of my league, but it was just one of those things where I didn't get a chance to take my date home. I had to have Mike take her home because I had to take care of my wasted friend Tommy to get him to go back to his house, sneak into his house, get his keys, drive back, get his car, follow him back to his house to make sure he gets in. But you know what? That's what friends do.
Oh yeah.
And when I look back on it, it could not have happened any other way. So Tommy got screwed before the show, Mike got screwed during the show, and I got screwed after the show.
I just got
Before-
to be in orbit around that. I was just in orbit, and I had Robert with me, and I was like, "Oh, Robert's experiencing Tom just playing the whole. He was the band. He was basically the band.
Air guitar.
Drums,
air-
guitar, and Robert's just like
He was
that
just
guy's enjoying the
Over
shit."
exaggerating everything.
And so yeah, and then I
Forgot-
remember
I
Mike
forgot
coming
that
back.
Robert.
Not me, another
I
one.
forgot that Robert and you were there.
That's right.
Because I've told this story probably 5 or 6, 10 times because it's so hilarious. But I forgot that part of it, that you were actually there and your little brother was like watching Tommy. And
I think now the worst concert we were was the Aerosmith 8th row, where it was just guys catching on fire, the band's drunk. Mike, you have a
yeah,
least favorite show?
Mine, the artist has been mentioned, Ted Nugent. He played in Reunion Arena. This is well past his prime. The opening band, there were two, I can't remember. Maybe Robin Trower, I don't think so. Anyway, but the main opening band was Golden Earring, which, you know, whatever. And then yeah, he came out and he was well into the phase where he was espousing his political views. And I went into the thing and I didn't really, I went along to the show. It wasn't my idea, but I got partway into it and I'm getting a migraine, not because of the show. I just used to get them. And I ended up walking out like partway through his show and just going, sit in the car waiting for my friends to get out. And of course they gave me hell afterwards, you know, but yeah, there were others, but that's, you know, I was physically ill at that one. So
I got a headache from the Ted Nugent show too. I think I saw him twice in a short time too, and it was just like it was like the Sammy Hagar thing too. It was like, please, no more Wango Tango. I can't handle it.
Yeah, the
Catch Fever.
Aerosmith one was a classic where we had 7th row, and the
Yep. That was
band
on
came
New Year's
out and they
Eve.
were completely wasted. Tyler didn't even remember the words like "Sweet Emotion." Remember, he launched that harmonica at somebody in the stands because that was December 30th. People had fireworks, and now they're shooting
Right.
bottle rockets off in the arena. And then they shot that one thing that twirls real fast that makes colors, but when it comes down, it's fire. And it caught the guy in his shirt, and his shirt caught on fire right behind us. And then the capper was, in addition to the band members fighting on stage amongst themselves, which is a treat. The drummer seemed so pissed off that he just starts hurling all these drumsticks. And
He's breaking
one just
sticks,
right in front of us.
throwing
So
out.
this huge dude just plows through everybody, knocks over like 3 people, and just you're like, oh my God, what is going on here? Worst show I've ever been to.
So let me add clarity to that because I've actually remember that too. So this ogre of a man, we're only 17 years old or whatever we were, 16, 17, hadn't been to that many shows, and we're standing on our chairs. So we're standing up on the floor, and this guy comes out of nowhere, and he must have been 6'5" and 300. He comes up and he's got hair coming everywhere from what I remember. And he steps and he stands right on Jose's chair. And I'm on the other side of Jose, but he's on Jose's chair. And it's during the encore. So they do the encore of Dream On. And all through the show, the drummer had thrown out probably, I don't know, maybe 10 pairs of sticks. He had a whole box of them. And so it got to the encore, and this guy is standing on Jose's chair, and I'm about to crap my pants. We're both going, just don't do anything. Well, then he goes a couple more rows up during for the encore, and he's just going Aerosmith, Aerosmith, Aerosmith. And there's this little kid, probably 10 or 12 years old, right, much younger than us, little kid. Now he's standing on that guy's chair, and we're going, oh, whatever, and we're just going, dream on, dream on. And it's like slow motion. He hits that cymbal, he throws it out, and we see the stick is going, and we're going, it's coming, it's going to come to us. No, it's not going to come to us. And then the little kid reaches up and grabs it, and we're like, yeah, he got the stick. And then the big guy just goes, boom, and takes his stick from him.
Right.
And he goes flying like, and chairs are tumbling over. We're just like going, oh, this kid just got, I mean, we're like, for us, our hearts are racing, and we're like, this is a fight. Something's gonna, that's how I remember it. So I mean, it
Yeah.
wasn't just
It's
the
kind of
overdue.
similar.
It
Yeah,
was like,
we have the thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, it's the shock and awe of what we just saw, violence right in front of us. For me, that was like traumatic. Was that how you saw it?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say there's I know we got to wrap it up soon, but there was a show I saw that wasn't my worst show. I liked it. It was Elton John. But the people, poor people, 2 rows in front of us, I think, or maybe they were 1 row in front of us. Some friends of mine from high school, we went, and it was clearly a date. I could see taking a date to an Elton John concert, impressing her. You know, it's romantic songs mainly, and so this date, they're all dressed up and everything. They're real cute. You know, they look older to me, but I'm sure they were in their teens. And the first thing that happened is the guy immediately in front of us. So yeah, it was 2 rows up. He was totally drunk. He was just really drunk, and he loses his balance and falls over to the next row on top of the girl. And later in the same show, the guy threw up, but not on the girl. But and then so they kind of recover from that. And then at some point, we were like in the lower balcony. Somebody in the upper balcony threw some type of soft drink in a cup with ice, everything, and it just landed on this couple, same couple, you know. And I'm just like, "Ah, God, either they that brought them together and they have a story to tell, or that was it. That was the last date. I felt so bad for those people. Yeah, lots of bad shows, but plenty of good ones.
No, there's the good always outweighs the bad, and you just face it. That's why you continue to go. Well, at least I continue to go, and you know, let's face it, there's nothing like going to a show. It just really isn't. You know, you can equate it, but you know, it's like going to see a fine piece of art, or you know, going to a great sporting event. You know, but a show definitely is one of those things that you know, I was hooked the minute I went. The first time I went, obviously, I still go to a lot. I don't go to a lot as many as I used to, but we still go to shows, and I think those are a lot of the reasons that all of them are, you know, kind of exemplified on this list.
Well, guys, I really
Right.
appreciate your contributions. I thought there were a lot of great songs. I learned some new ones and was reminded of some I hadn't heard, and got to show you a little bit of what I like. So we'll do another one of these. The next playlist is you, right, Dave? So we'll be
Yes.
I think it is. So we'll be coming up with that soon. So thank you very much.